Hi, class. Let's take a look at the dermis now. So in a previous video, we did mention the epidermis. And what we know about the epidermis is that if you have thick skin in this area, it's made up of those 5 microscopic layers. And in areas that have thinner skin, only 4. And remember, from superficial to deep, it was share. Whoops, give me a second. Let's try that again. Share loves getting skin Botox, right? So it's stratum corneum, stratum lucidum, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and stratum basal. Those are the 5 microscopic layers in the epidermis. Once we go deeper to that, we're in the dermal layer, into the dermis. And the dermis is a lot easier. It's only made up of 2 layers, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. And it looks like the papillary layer, it's like the upper 20%, and then the lower reticular makes up the remaining 80% of the dermis. And you could see that in the dermal layer, this is where we have a lot of the accessory structures. You can see you have the shaft of the hair, we have a little muscle, the erector pili muscle, we have a sweat gland, we have an oil gland, we've got some blood vessels, we've got some tactile nerve receptors. So if you think of it, right, we cover tissues, and the skin is made up of epithelial tissue and connective tissue, right? Because you have blood here, and you've got fat down here, fat cells. And then we have nerve, tactile receptors, and Pacinian corpuscles. And then we have muscle. So it's made up of all 4 types of tissues. And then deep to the dermis, then we have the 3rd layer, which is the hypodermis. So the 3 main layers of skin are the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, sometimes called the sub-Q or the subcutaneous, right? This is where a lot of injections are given into the hypodermis because you have your blood vessels down here. So the dermis is connective tissue layer, and it's composed of collagen and some elastic fibers and fibroblasts and macrophages. We know we have immune cells in the skin. It's our first line of defense. And there's even some fat cells there. There is hair follicles, there are sebaceous glands, sudiferous glands, right? You got oil glands and sweat glands, you've got nerves, you got blood vessels. So the upper part, or the superficial part, is the papillary region, and that's like the upper 20%. And then the reticular is the deeper, that makes up about 80%. And it's the dermis. This is the layer where when people have ink or tattoos, it's that layer that holds the ink, which is the dermis. And the reason that happens is our immune cells, which are phagocytes, they ingest the ink. They ingest that protein and hold on to it for years and years and years. Because remember, the ink is a foreign protein. So when it's injected into the skin, macrophages engulf that foreign protein and they just keep it there and store it there. And there is some leading research that's showing now that when people get tattoos, there are some people that are very sensitive and genetically engineered, where since it upregulates the immune system, it can cause a lot of autoimmune syndrome in many, many people. This happened to happen to my mother-in-law, where she, in her late 50s, early 60s, decided to get a tattoo on her wrist. Nothing big, nothing big, but it sparked an autoimmune condition very, very shortly after, and creating a type of leukemia for her that she's been managing. So when I see people with lots and lots of tattoos, I'm always like wondering, oh my gosh, I hope that they're okay. I hope that it has not sparked any type of autoimmunity. Because remember, your skin is part of your immune system, and you do have immune cells there. So when you upregulate your immune system, it's unpredictable. We don't know based on the person's genetics, are they more susceptible or not? So please just, it's something, this is really kind of new research. You can see this is from 2021, but there's a lot of evidence that's showing where, it's kind of like no different where if someone's allergic to a food and they keep putting that food into them, it could spark an autoimmune reaction, right? So you don't want to be putting foreign proteins in your body that your body doesn't recognize. I think they look great, they look wonderful. I think many of them are very artsy and very creative, but from a health perspective, just make an educated, informed decision when it comes to your health and well-being. In terms of the dermis, there is a condition called dermatitis, and we know anything that ends in itis just means inflammation. So dermatitis is an inflammation of that upper layer, the papillary layer. And it can be caused by infection, it can be caused by radiation, mechanical irritation, chemicals, even poison ivy, right? Poison ivy, you can rub up against it and the skin turns red and itchy and erythematous right away, causing pain and itchiness. And then the dense, irregular connective tissue. Now we're in the reticular region, which is dense, irregular connective tissue, also contains collagen and elastin. It's packed with your sebaceous glands. That's your oil glands, your sediferous glands. That's your sweat glands. You've got some fat. You've got your hair follicles in there. And it's the reticular region that provides strength and extensibility and elasticity to the skin. And when it reaches its limits, as it can sometimes with obesity, sometimes in bodybuilders where their muscles get too thick, or even during pregnancy, this is where we can see stretch marks, which are dermal tears from extreme stretching, where there's no more give. So that is from the reticular region where you get those stretch marks. And then the hypodermis, way down at the bottom, right? So we can see we have the epidermis here, we have the dermis here, and then way down below, they're calling it the subcutaneous, which is the hypodermis. Okay, you can see it's made up of lots of fat, lots of blood vessels down there. This is where a lot of subcutaneous injections take place. Okay, we'll take a break here. When we come back, we're going to get into skin pigmentation.